brought to you by Brass and Unity. We make wearable conversation starters. Our new buddy check packs are available now. Grab one and check on one of your closest buddies. They may need it now more than ever. Go to brassandunity.com, use the code UNITY, and get 20% off. And let's all heal together. And brought to you by Combat Flip-Flops. Bad for running and even worse for fighting. Combat Flip-Flops are your ticket to the unarmed forces by providing you with military-inspired quality footwear for men and women. To help support the podcast and in support of women in developing countries, head over to combatflipflops.com and become a part of their unarmed forces today. Be sure to use the code UNITY at checkout and get 25% off. And brought to you by GFDA. Good fucking design advice. The voice in your head and the foot up your ass. GFDA makes prints, drinkware, and apparel for people who want to do their fucking best. Go and use the code UNITY and get 10% off now on anything on their site, including our collaborative product, Fucking Help Somebody. And brought to you by Daisy May Hat Co., the custom hat company based in Nashville, Tennessee. They make custom one-of-a-kind hats from wide-brimmed fedoras to cowboy hats. All of their hats are 100% beaver felt, and it's the highest quality hat you can get. They also have the coolest shirts ever. You can use the code BRASS at checkout for 15% off your entire order. Go and check out daisymayhats.com. Embrace the fever. Live the dream.
Jack Posobiec. Posobiec? Did I say that
close.
right?
You're so close.
Help me.
Bic. It's big like the razor.
Posobiec. Posobiec?
Razor, like the pen or whatever. But in Polish, of course, it's actually a little bit different. In Polish, you would say Jacek Posobiec. So it's actually like a TZ sound.
Oh.
But in the Polish language, you do the alphabet a little bit differently. So it's the letter C, even though it's a TZ sound. And then because Poles are like that. I like to say that we keep the language deliberately undecipherable to discourage immigration. Like, can't speak this language, probably can't move there, just moving on. It's like, yeah, keep going, get out of here. Don't want you. We're 1 minute in. I already got you.
We hit it. We're in. And welcome to the show, Jack. I'm thrilled to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, man. For people who don't know who you are, you're quite an interesting individual online. You've got quite the presence, and you say a lot of things that I wish I could say, but would be thrown in prison in Canada if I did.
Yeah, actually, we saw that certainly with the trucker convoy whole situation. People were thrown in prison for honking. Just a couple of weeks ago. We don't even talk about it anymore, but it just happened. It was this huge major thing. People thrown in prison for honking, people getting attacked. I guess by way of background, for those who don't follow me, prior Navy intelligence officer, was stationed at Navy intelligence headquarters in DC, bounced around a bit, mostly East Asia. So China was a big focus for me, Mandarin linguist on that side, but then also did one deployment, counterterrorism and interrogation cell at Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there. I love that you, it's clear that you know what you're doing because you just give me the beginning clip, exactly what I need from you. And it's so easy to have conversations with people like you because you make my job fun. You make it in a way that there's an understanding with the dance. So when you start breaking down, I want to even go before that. Why the hell did you join the military in the first place? And intelligence at all is something that a lot of people, when I hear I want to join the army, it's not, I want to go Navy intel. It's, I want to go shoot bad guys.
Right. Well, for me, I kind of had this idea that, I thought, you're probably not very naive like everybody else before you join. You're like, oh yeah, you join Intel, you're going to be James Bond and Jason Bourne all rolled into one. But for me, I'm going to learn some Chinese. So I actually learned, believe it or not, I lived in China as part of study abroad when I was in college, in Shanghai. And then I ended up staying for like 2 years. So I learned Chinese even prior to joining. So I already had this interest in China. And then as I was looking at it, I was like, this is like what, 15, 16 years ago. And I said, look, I think this is like the absolute growing threat. This is something that's going to be a huge issue for us down the line. And this is global war on terror had, really was the major focus we're talking 05-06 timeframe. But I remember just every time I turned around, it was like, China's here, China's there, China's doing this, China's doing that. And I said, you know what? Everybody I know is studying Arabic or Farsi, right, or Pashto. I'm going to study Mandarin because what's something that nobody else is doing. So that's what I did, and everybody said I was nuts. And then of course, eventually get sent to Gitmo anyway. But that's how that goes. But then so yeah, I go to China, live there for 2 years in the city of Shanghai. So not to jump ahead too far, but when you see some of these videos coming out of Shanghai right now with these lockdowns that are going on and the people starving and screaming and just trying to get some food, I'm looking at that, I'm like, these were my neighbors, right? These were families that we would go to host families, and they would they bring you in, they teach you some Chinese, you make dumplings, you have dinner together, and the people are great. The people of China are fantastic. And to me, looking at this stuff, it's really hard for me to watch it because it looks exactly like the apartment building I lived in, only you see somebody like jumping out to their death because they can't go on, because they can't live in the lockdown. And so they're at 6 weeks right now as we're recording this. They just announced last night that they're getting extended because they started opening it up in some of the districts, but then cases popping up again. 2 people tested positive here, 4 people tested positive there. So they're putting the lockdowns back down on I think all but 4 of the 16 districts of Shanghai. And that's for people, the perspective of the numbers in a city in China is something that we almost can't really grasp in the United States or in the West, because there are just so many more people than they have in our cities. So if you look at the New York metropolitan area, everybody knows New York City. The entire New York metropolitan area is like 5 million people, right? That's maybe a small district in Shanghai, right? The city of Shanghai is 29 million people average. And when I say average, is interesting because their city actually fluctuates. Because during the day, a lot of migrant workers will come in and build up the city and then flood in. And then as the day ends, they'll flood out. I guess similar to a city with suburban workers, how that used to be in the US prior to COVID and everything else. But you'll see as many as 2 to 3 million people coming on a regular day, prior to lockdowns, coming into the city during that time. So you're pushing 30 million. This is one of the largest cities on the face of the planet, and they've turned it into an open air prison. And when I look at that thing, I actually did reach out to some of the people that I knew that I had stayed with. We kind of keep in touch, and they're all good. Like they've either gotten out or they're in a different part of the country and they're okay. So that of course made me feel better. I was like, saying a prayer for them. But looking at it from this perspective, it's crazy. So I came in, and then I picked Navy because I just really wanted to focus on China. As you can tell, that's a subject matter focus for me. And so I really wanted to focus on that. And it looked like Navy was the one that had the most interface with China. It was the one that touched it the most because, number one, if there was any conflict that kicks off with China, it's going to be over South China Sea, or it's going to be over Taiwan. That's going to be a Navy fight, right? That's obviously just going to be a Navy fight, just the same way as our war with Japan was largely a Navy fight. And then if that, kind of going backwards from there, it looked like Navy was what I wanted to do. And then I already spoke Mandarin. And so they said, hey, do you want to be like a crippy, as we call them, crippies in the Navy, cryptologic interpreter. And I said, no, I do not want to be the guy who's hard pass. Full stop. Do not want to be the guy who's just translating all day long. I want to actually figure out what's going on, figure out what they're up to, try to get inside their head a little bit more. So that's why I went the intel route, and started enlisted, then went officer because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I'm one of the first people,
obviously.
Yeah, I know, right? So had my degree, then went enlisted before I went officer. And basically when people come to me now, on the other side of it, I always say, guys, ROTC all day long. That is like such a cheat code, and it will set you up for success. And that, by the way, I think working for a living on the enlisted side at the same time, There is nothing more honorable than doing that. Those are the people that actually get their hands dirty. Those are the people actually doing the work. And, that's a great life. I still have buddies that are still in that, that went on, and, they're E7s and E8s now. And, look, some of them, not a lot of the guys I know
Not all of them.
pushing anything higher than that. But it's just interesting to see sort of the different career paths people take. I actually got hit up by a girl that I was in a class with down at Virginia Beach, just on Instagram, because a lot of people say like, oh, look at look at Poso. I knew him; he was just the guy who sat next to me in the classroom and in the schoolhouse, and now he's doing podcasts and everything. And she's a chief now, so that's an E7, but she's up for warrant. So I said, oh, look at that, you're going up for warrant, and she deserves it too. She should get it.
That's impressive. I love that. I love hearing that you keep in touch with those types of people. I mean, it's important when individuals grow out of the pond they're in to, I feel like there's a responsibility, and maybe in my opinion, I don't know. I always like to try to uplift individuals. And if you've surpassed a certain mark in your life, it's always nice to go back and be able to help uplift others and keep passing that along. It's kind of like the pay it forward method. Just, letting people know that they're cared for and seen and things like that. It makes a difference. There's a lot there. A lot. Let's start with China. I want to know why your obsession started with China, when it started, and what really is it about the culture that you feel you want to understand? Does it come from a want to understand them so that you can look at them from the lens of intelligence, of really like, why are they moving the way they're moving, predicting movements, seeing movements? Is that really the obsession, or is it the culture in general? And like you said, I've traveled to China a few times. I understand the people are incredibly hospitable. They kept an entire hotel open for my husband and I, so that when we got there and all of the factory owners were there, that we would sit down and have dinner. I mean, none of them shook my hand and thought that I was the owner
when you arrived,
company.
right?
Well, yeah, totally.
That's
but
a huge thing in China. Huge thing.
Huge, but
So
they're hospitable as hell.
But here's the thing, right? If it would be considered dishonorable in China, if they had guests arriving from overseas coming all the way to see them, it would be considered dishonorable and was considered a loss of face if they didn't have the hotel open and have food ready for you when you arrived. That would be considered like just a slap in the face. That would be like them saying like, a huge disrespect to you, huge disrespect. So the idea of respect and treating someone to dinner is a huge, huge deal in China. That's why, it's always sort of the head of the household, or the host is always the one. If you're going to someone's house, the head of the household will always sit furthest from the door, right? You notice that they're sort of at the head of the table there. But then also, if you're going out, right, that person is going to treat, right? There wouldn't even be a question of splitting the bill. Obviously tipping doesn't exist over there, like it doesn't exist in most of the world. But the idea that you would go out and have to pay for something is just completely unheard of. It would be considered, again, a dishonorable insight to them. But so for me, though, it wasn't, the cultural aspects of it I thought were interesting, but it really was more that intelligence kind of, footprint that I was more interested in. I'm not one of those, you meet a lot of guys, when you're an expat in Asia, you meet a lot of guys who are like, they're there because they're super into anime, or they're super into manga, and martial arts obviously is really big. And I met some of those guys as well. You meet you meet half the expats are always writing a book, I'm working on it. I'm just almost done. I'm on chapter 4, I'm on chapter 14 now, like, okay, dude, yeah, you're teaching English, like you're teaching English, and you're like dating people, and you're doing
living your life, man. It's cool.
Yeah. But they always have to say like they're up on something. But that being said, even though I initially came to it from the intelligence sort of perspective, what made it so much more interesting for me was that here's a place that has a completely different history than the West, a completely different cultural background, a completely different upbringing. Their value system is different. The way they think and the way they approach problems is completely different from the West. And so what was so interesting to me as, a 21, 22-year-old kid from the Philadelphia area, that's where I'm born and raised, is that it made me learn more about myself and my presuppositions and my preconceived notions about how the world should be and how people should act and what is right and what is wrong. And not in a sense that it changed my morality, but it just gives you different perspectives, and it allows you to expand your horizons in ways that you maybe would never have thought had you not had that experience, to really be able to look at something from someone else's perspective. And the Iraq War was in full swing during this time period, and so that was something where, for me, looking at it from my perspective, it's like, well, yeah, I'm a patriot. I support my country. What else would there be? But then you talk to people and they said, well, what did Iraq ever do to you? And did they never attack the United States? And they weren't part of 9/11. So why did you go do this? And I actually remember one time I had this taxi driver in Shanghai, and I've been all over China, but Shanghai is where I lived. But this guy said, he's like, oh yeah, really respect Americans, and I usually told people I was American too if they asked, because some of the expats, they say, oh, just say you're Canadian, because
Everybody says that. Nobody wants
yeah,
to say that anymore.
tie the maple leaf on your backpack, so somebody knows. And that's like a big thing with expats. And I said, no, I'll just say I'm American. Right. So I told the guy I'm American. He's like, oh yeah, a lot of respect for Americans. You guys, you tell people what to do, and if they say no, I was like, oh, like that's how America is perceived over here. That's
100%.
Yeah, that's a little bit different than what I thought. I thought we were just going around saving the world. And so like little things like that, and they start to add up. But then also, really got into, actually, the history of Shanghai as a city is like super interesting, because they go from this like fishing village to a treaty port after the Opium War, with Imperial China, the Qing dynasty, and predominantly basically the British Empire. So it becomes this sort of like European colony city where there's like a French section and a British section, a little American section, and some German stuff over here, and then after that, of course, then the Japanese invades. There's all sorts of battles. Then the communists come in and take over. So there's just a ton of history in that city, as well as Hong Kong and others that was super, super into. And what's actually very sad, is that the CCP right now, even though of course they were founded in Shanghai back in the 1920s, had their first like party meeting and everything, and they have like the little like house is still there, and you can go visit it, and they have little statues of like Chairman Mao and the other guys. But they're destroying actually most of the historic buildings in Shanghai. They're tearing it down, and they're called these old shikuman. It's sort of like, they're called stone courtyards, but it's the idea of this massive courtyard, and almost looks like cobblestones, and it's multiple apartments centered around one open area. So multiple families would essentially be living together, and so you'd have your own apartment, but then you'd have a community space in the middle. And there are these really cool blocks and alleys that connect all of them, and a lot of them are being smashed apart, and modern apartment buildings are being put up, and high rises and all that. And I guess that's a way to make more money, but you're really losing a lot of the character and a lot of the history of the city in doing so.
It's really concerning to see things like that happen. I do talk about a lot of this on the show, and we've actually been shadow banned, and we've actually are being threatened to be demonetized and all of that now because of Bill C-11. So where I sit and how things work and how I have these discussions are very few and far between, because my opinions on them are very similar to yours and quite strong in terms of what's going on in China, and why we should be paying attention to things like this because of what's being implemented in my home country, and slowly seeping into yours in ways that people are very unaware. And it's really concerning also because having people in Taiwan, having people in China, and having these conversations with them on a daily basis, hearing things like at the very beginning, anybody who was getting vaccinated early on, they were getting an opportunity to go live in a better apartment building.
Right.
These are things that when we have these discussions about generations being wiped off the face of the earth and active concentration camps, while also doing import and export, it's this weird dynamic with China because there's so fucking much to have a conversation about. And I try to come at it from Somewhat positive perspective considering how dangerous they feel. And on the other side, I work in conjunction with people over there. So I also understand what the people are like, but I also understand what the party is like and how concerning it is to see it really being emulated and put on a pedestal, this communistic ideals with people like my prime minister. You can't have these conversations or you're deemed a threat to the nation. And
Right.
that's people like to go and say, well,
Honking your horn too loud.
what's wild to me is because you don't know my background, but I'm pretty, for the most part, I've always been pretty damn liberal on most things. And there has been this shift in me over the past decade that hasn't even been necessarily going to the left or right, but being completely politically homeless on so many topics and so many areas. And then now I somehow, the mental health advocate, is being seen as the what's the best word I've been called? Like the anti-vaxxing, communistic, like hater, the one that is like not for her country, when I'm still living in the country trying to fight for the country so that I can go back to what the hell it was when I served for it, you know? And so it's this weird dynamic. And I do want to get into that a little bit with you because I've seen your rise online and things like that, and what that does to a human being and the toll that takes, because you can't sit there and pretend that with getting hate online the level you do for things that anybody should be able to have a conversation about, it can't not affect you, my dude. And I don't know how comfortable you are talking about that, but it's got to have some effect. It just does.
Well, for me, it's honestly, like, at this point, you know, when you first go through it, it's so strange, right? Because usually for me, it was like, you know, the first time you get misquoted by a major news source. And so, like, you know, if you're coming from my side of the aisle, like we already, you know, have a general disdain for most of the mainstream media to begin with. But
no, you don't. I didn't know that.
When you're in it, yeah, no, I know, shocking, right? Spoiler alert. But when it happens to you the first time, nobody can really explain what it's actually like, because you say something that, and maybe you haven't had, you know, full, you know, or myself, haven't had full media training yet. And so you think what you're saying makes complete sense and is just very straightforward and reasonable. And then you read what's printed. And what they've done is, and this is why I record all my interviews now, on the rare occasions that I do them with the mainstream, is that what they've printed is like half of what you said, and without all of the beginning part of the context of what you're talking about, and make it, well, this person said this, to which they can say, well, yeah, I said that, but that wasn't the context that I said it in. And it creates this whole narrative that makes very people upset. And when I read some of the articles, I say, boy, I would be really upset if I was this person. If I didn't know me, I would hate this guy, right? And so I'm at the point now where I do think there's been such a bifurcation, or really, you know, just smash in the iron grip that the mainstream media had on society, that I don't think it's as big of a deal as it used to be. In the sense that, but basically this way, a hit piece back in the 1990s, if you wrote a hit piece on someone, whether it be in politics or personal life or the military, whatever it is, I mean, they're done, right? They're just done, right? Your life is over. You're not getting a job. You're not getting a sponsorship. You're not getting on, you know, there's no such thing as social media. So it would be like a radio show or a TV show. You know, ironically, Howard Stern was one of the first victims of this, and now has turned around and is one of the worst persecutors of others when it comes to this.
Which is boggling to me too. It feels very, I see that with so many individuals. I see this, you know, they're so pro one thing and then they slap the other way as soon as they're at a certain point when they feel like they're above others. Or I've had it happen to me, I've had it happen on a small scale. Like I've had it happen in a very small scale compared to you.
But you know what I'm talking about. You know the dynamic.
Oh, it's vicious. Yeah.
And it's like, I guess it's like when you're on the come up, you know, you're willing to call out the system. You're willing to, you know, have that voice. You know, and then once you attain a certain level, then you want to be part of the system. I mean, case in point, you know, not to like beleaguer the actual topic, but you can go back to, so Chris Rock, like I was a big fan of Chris Rock, you know, Bigger and Blacker, Roll It the New, you know, his classic 90s comedy albums. And it's just him, your recordings of him doing his set, but there's like little sketches here. Cheap Heat was hilarious. The guy's like, I don't need an air conditioner in that car, you know. Air seems fine to me. You know, take it off. And like hilarious, just funny stuff, right?
Yeah,
And
good stuff.
he had this whole thing about vaccines actually early on. He was talking about there's no money in the cure. They don't cure anything anymore. He's like, you think they're going to cure AIDS? They can't even cure athlete's foot. Again, I'm quoting Chris Rock. I'm quoting him. I'm not like making any statement.
Don't worry, I won't take it out of context either.
Right.
So don't stress.
You know, he's like, he's just making a joke about the situation. And he goes, you know, maybe we'll get to the point, because it's during AIDS. He goes, you know, maybe we'll get to the point where, you know, some old men will say, oh, I got some, you know, it's about to rain. How do you know? My rheumatism is acting up, you know, and just different things. But then he turns around and becomes one of these huge promoters of that same thing. And even to the point where people are getting mandated for it. And it's like, well, wait a minute, weren't you the guy that used to make fun of this stuff like years ago? And you had all those great jokes, which were funny because, and this is the best part of actual humor, right? So, and there's that whole thing, I don't know if you've seen it, where it's sort of like a catchphrase or a metonym where people say the left can't meme because the left are memes. And there's a kernel of truth to that, because comedy works when you have a shared understanding of reality. So a shared observation of reality. This is why in you know, most comics make jokes about the differences between men and women, because it's something that's just a blue chip topic. Everyone in their life has experienced the differences between men and women, but of course, because of social taboos, we're not supposed to talk about it. But that's why they get into it, because that's, you know, it's just comedy that's going to be relatable to everyone, right? Observational humor. But and then Jerry Seinfeld goes off and makes like a whole career based on observational humor. But suddenly it comes along and we're told by these new comics that no, you're not allowed to joke about those certain things, but also we're going to tell you jokes that require like 10 pages of dialogue before you can understand the you know, the plot line or the punchline, because it's, you know, it's their twisted, distorted version of what's going on that they require you to put all these blinders and context and worldview in front of, rather than just making an observation on something that we can all see based in reality. This is also, by the way, why art itself is something that if you're on the far left, you can't actually do art, because art itself good art is a reflection of reality, or a reflection of some shared truth. But and then, you know, it could be different expressions of that shared truth. It doesn't mean it has to be realism, right? But they can't do that because they have a difficulty perceiving reality.
It's interesting to hear you speak about when you're talking about the left or you're talking about the right, you say they. That by definition is just like it's like such a grouping of people. It's such a it's such a box you put around people. I wonder, do you think that you've always been this way, where you've always been very stern in putting people in boxes? The way you talk about people, that's a term that like
well,
I don't know.
You know, when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about specific political classifications of people, not any one individual. Because again, you know, Chris Rock is someone I can point to and say, well, that's Chris Rock. I don't know if he's on the left or the right or whatever. Same with Dave Chappelle or Elon Musk or Joe, you know, whoever, right? You know, because every individual is going to be different. But when you're talking about a political group,
like
right,
a full-on group,
you have to have some kind of term to kind of, you know, explain who it is exactly you're talking about. The same way that if you're talking about the people of China aren't, you know, there's what 1.2 billion, but they're not all the same, obviously.
It's just interesting when I talk to Americans about politics or we bring up these topics. I just don't hear that very often spoken about in Canada that way. So really? It's just I don't know why. I don't know if it's maybe because the way what we look at politics, it's just not as aggressive. I think that we don't Canadians in general, and maybe I'm speaking very broadly, but I think
well, if there's one thing
I'm gonna do
Canadians
it.
aren't known for, it's aggression.
They haven't all met me yet. The problem is we're not known for aggression.
Well, I mean,
are we ever
you guys
aggressive?
did burn down the White House, so there is that.
I mean, you got to push us to a point, okay? We'll all get to a point. Our point is just
Well, no,
further than your point.
I can actually give the response to that, because the Americans burned down Toronto, which was York at the time.
Okay, so
there was a back and forth. There was a back and forth.
It was the first time and only time we pushed back on anything.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's in Canada. I just don't. The political divide is there, but it's not there like it is in the United States. So like when I'm interviewing anybody or I'm in America, I know exactly who I'm dealing with based on the language they use. Mm-hmm. Immediately, there's no question. When I'm in Canada, it's very unsure. I'm very unsure. They're like, there's a lot of closeted, Republican type individuals, and there's a lot of closeted liberals. There isn't that open discussion of like, they can't do art. Like that's that's just a way of describing it. I've never been exposed to.
It's true though. It's totally true.
Yeah. Are you talking about realism from an arts perspective? Are you just realism?
No,
just art realism. In general.
Just art in general. I think that because if you think, if you're someone who completely thinks in surrealist abstraction and you have no connection to reality in any way, then at some point you're just you're either dreaming yourself into complete absurdity, or you're navel gazing and you're trying. So deconstructivism is like one of the hallmarks of postmodernism. So you're constantly just deconstructing anything. So how can you build something? How can you create anything if all you're doing is going around trying to deconstruct the whole world?
Nitpicking and tearing things down.
Precisely. This is why people are turning away from postmodernism in droves, and thank God for that. Because I mean, we just need to get away. It's a destructive ideology. It's something, there is no truth. There is only opinion. And maybe I should have said postmodernist, right? Postmodern, fits a little better. Postmodern art. What even is that, right? There is no truth. There's your truth. There's my truth. There's the tree, or is it the representation? No, it's a tree. It's just a tree.
It's made out of wood.
It's a tree. It's a tree. It's wood. It's got branches. It's part of nature, right? We like them. They give us air. Trees are good, right? So your value system, stop. Right. And then and that's the biggest thing too, is that there's no value system, right? So there is no good and bad. There's only a person's perception of good and bad, and the person's choice into whether something is good for them or bad for them.
The church and state deal in the United States is very different. I find you guys are very involved when it comes to religion and pushing, I'll say pushing that, but in schools, but like it's not as separate as it is up here. Before we used to sing God Save the Queen. Yes, we are still part of the UK in that sense that we are, the Queen is still our girl. She's our homie. We're still under that kind of rule. But there is a detachment though within Canada, where as in America, it's like the southern states, the Bible Belt, that holds strong. And then you get this other part of our...
I would say it used to. That since the 1990s, that's largely gone by and far the wayside, mostly because of different court rulings where people have gone in, and of course we've got a big potential court ruling coming up along that many people view along those lines, but it's been a systemic and really not just in the United States but the West, a systemic driving of God out of the public square. And what that has done is ushered in this postmodern era, because when you drive out God, you drive the shared set of a moral center, right? And so that's what the Bible is at its most basic value, right? And I'm speaking from purely secular perspective. Me, I'm Catholic, like I'm Bible 100%, right? And so my whole family, we're Polish. That's how we come.
See, I'm a recovering Catholic. We're different. We'll
get you
like,
back. We'll bring you home.
No chance. I do too many psychedelics for that, my friend.
It's funny enough is I've got a friend.
Oh, there's a lot of overlap.
I was about to say, I've got a friend who was an atheist who then did psychedelics and is like, I need to become a Christian now.
See, I'm on the sense of I would,
which was wild, and I
baptized.
did not expect to see that coming.
Really? You don't see? No, you've never seen that direct correlation. There's with psychedelics.
Well, I see it now. I see it now, 100%.
There's an absolute ton. It's at the basics, at the basics, at the base of all is we are one. We are all humans. We are all of something bigger than ourselves. We are all connected. We are all unified. There is that you and I will, we can hang on that all day long.
Absolutely
but then there's shit that's like, that Catholic Church sure did murder a lot of Canadian kids, and we're finding them in mass graves, and they're not owning up to it, kind of problem.
Well, there's been some issues with that story. A lot of that came out as like cemeteries.
It's not. They're in my province.
Oh,
I've been to them. It's straight up apple orchards in the middle of residential schools, like with thousands of children. Like it's bigger than that, and that's where the church and I can never. I went to church. I did Catholic school. I did it all, man. I wore the white dress at communion.
I'll put it this way. I'll put it this way. The organization of the church, like any human organization, and not to like go down the whole rabbit hole in this.
Oh, but you're right. You just said the right word there, though, and I think that's the key word that people miss. Any human organization,
right, is going to commit sin, because all humans do commit sin, but that does not change the fact that it is the church founded by Christ Jesus.
Yeah, I don't, again, I did that in school, and I have so many memories of it being a positive experience to a point. And then once there was this conversation in Catholic schools where there was a lot of hate put into it. And then I lost out on that. And then I joined the military. And then you go through that stage when you're in Afghanistan, just dropping bombs on people left, right, and center, and saying like, I'm doing this because they're hateful towards me, and I've been taught to hate them. And there's this whole, we should hate people that are different, but yet we should love the church and the Bible because we're all one, but yet we're willing to drop bombs in Yemen, and we're willing to drop bombs here, and we're willing to drone here. It's a real hard thing
on that. And I don't know if you saw Pope Francis came out and said, got a lot of press over, and I'm not like really much of a Pope Francis fan when he gets into politics, that he came out and said something about the war in Ukraine, where he was sort of saying like,
what was that about?
Where he was basically saying, and of course, the Vatican office had to come out and no, it was a mistranslation. Because what he said was, well, he's like, I disagree with what Russia's doing, and I think most people do. But then he also added, and I think that NATO shouldn't have been barking at Russia's door. That led to the anger that the Kremlin felt, and suddenly it's like, whoa, not allowed to say that, not allowed to say that. And it reminded me of something that I had not thought of in almost 20 years. And going back at the time, I remember in around 2002, 2003, it was that huge push for the Iraq war. It was, war fever was on 100%. Iraq has WMDs. They might have had something.
Oh, yes.
11. We better watch out. We can't let this happen again. We have to take on this new posture. We have to do preemptive strikes, all of it. And Pope John Paul II was one of the major figures who came out and said, don't do this. Don't do this. This is wrong, and it shouldn't be done. And I remember at the time, it was something I said, wait, but but I thought we were supposed to. So it's kind of like what you're saying, that,
right,
you have this idea of someone's telling you this is the right thing to do, and you're a patriot, and you're on the side of the angels, which is something, by the way, that the West does perpetually in the way that we conduct warfare, is through it's moral warfare. It's always moral warfare, right?
It's always hearts and minds.
We are spreading democracy, we are spreading truth, we are spreading freedom around the world, and every bomb that's dropped becomes another another seed, and that will blossom into a flower of freedom that goes on forever. And that's what you're told. I had buddies in the Navy who were on the USS Kearsarge, which was one of the ships that was involved in in Libya, in the initial, it wasn't really an invasion, but I guess you could say intervention in the Arab Spring that led to the downfall of Gaddafi. And had a buddy of mine who was enlisted intel specialist, who we reconnected years later, and he said, actually, funny enough, he was in the same class as me, as that other friend who, now that I think about it, that I just mentioned, who's up for warrant. And he goes, Jack, I remember that when we were running those missions and we were putting together the strike packages, so like your star package, your target set, that they were telling us we needed to do this because Gaddafi was about to slaughter all of his own people, and that we were saving Libya by attacking the Libyan government. And it was this sort of like, you had to do it. And then we said, oh, okay, well, if we're saving people, then this makes sense.
Right.
And then but then years later, he started questioning it, going, wait a minute, we didn't save anybody, right? We destroyed the government of a country and then allowed these insane groups, and this is where, Benghazi comes from and all the rest, allows all these groups to really come to power, or at least, create chaos throughout the entire country that obviously isn't better for anybody than the open air slave markets off of the coast of Tripoli now. And he was saying, wait a minute, did they lie to me when they were telling me to do those missions? I was like, well, I think we all lied to ourselves to an extent.
Well, I think that's it too, right? You get I had an episode yesterday where I had this discussion about like it's young men fight rich men wars, right? And that's what it is.
100%.
And that's all that it is you can be told something to go do something on behalf of something, and you can believe it wholeheartedly because of we're saving. But I mean, I was told I was saving the women and children when I was kicking down doors, pulling them into rooms, only to find yesterday they've gone back so far that women can't even leave their homes, and they have to wear the full burqa again. And it's
right.
it's like, what are we telling ourselves to justify going in and spreading love and joy and democracy, when realistically we're never there to fix it. We're there to make money, and we're there to fuck off. And then we leave these people in ruin. So I go through this weird moral outlook on how we go into these countries and we help these countries, when we never do it to the full. We never finish it. We never actually come through with what we say we're going to come through with. We have an ideal, we sell it to the government, we make a lot of money on weapon systems, and we go in and we blow it up, and then we go, you know what, it's not worth sticking it out and figuring it out. We can't. It's too much money.
In the United States, we're finding out that tonight, it looks like, as we record this, that President Biden is calling to up the $33 billion for Ukraine to $40 billion for Ukraine in a time where here in the US right now, I don't know if you've heard this yet, we've got a baby formula shortage, because they had to pull, I think it was Similac, off the shelves because they had an issue where there's a bacterial infection, and so that's had a cascading effect, because then everybody's trying to hoard the other brands.
Yep.
And you go to a Target now in like central Pennsylvania or Texas, and there's just a sign on the shelf, we're really sorry that we can't get it out. So at a time where we literally can't feed our own babies, our own children, right, and we're going to turn around and send an amount of money that's like the budget of a small country to a war that's on the other side of the planet, where we don't seem to have any plan whatsoever. It's like you just said, we don't seem to have any plan whatsoever for how it's supposed to go, other than fighting it for the sake of fighting.
Mm-hmm. And well, I mean, you're fighting for the sake of fighting because you have to keep the industrial complex going. If you involve yourself in something, then at least
the money laundering,
money comes.
Right. And I said, I was joking around on Twitter. I said, how much of that 40 billion goes to the big guy, right? Because we understand that there are contracts. The contracts go back to with the defense industry, so that same defense industry then will turn around and they will donate to the campaign coffers of everyone who supports them. And so, if you're someone who's in there, or if you're on the board of one of these things, if you're Lloyd Austin, who's the Secretary of Defense of the United States right now, came directly from the board of Raytheon. What's Raytheon the major manufacturer of? The Javelin anti-tank guided missile system. So the most ubiquitous weapon system that's being used on the battlefield in Ukraine. And because so many of them, unfortunately, have been captured, by the way, they're being used by both sides. What a great business model for Raytheon, where directly our Secretary of Defense for the United States came from, but we're told, don't worry, we're told that his stocks are in a blind trust. So even though he may not have divested from Raytheon, we know that everything's completely above board.
And like this is a genuine, serious question. So just bear with me when I ask this. How the fuck, how does anybody sit there and really, truly digest, like believe this shit? Because I know in Canada, there's people that sit there and are like, yep, Trudeau's a good guy. Trudeau didn't abuse the Wartime Act. Trudeau, you know what? That woman that got trampled, she threw a bike first. Did you know that? No, she didn't. No, she was an elderly woman sitting on a chair that was meant because she couldn't stand long enough and got trampled.
Yeah, like, I'll never forget that picture.
Did you, one moment. Did you see the 8 pages that got leaked from WhatsApp of the RCMP chat during the protest? The one that talks about,
or was it screenshots?
It was screenshots.
Screenshots of like a group chat.
Yeah.
And I know Kean Bexty, who's the guy who reported that originally. So I remember when that went up.
Yeah, him and Jeremy McKenzie. Jeremy reached out and sent it over, and he goes,
"Oh, he did."
Oh yeah, he goes, "Did you see this?" And I was
yeah.
"Oh, those are phone numbers and names and badge numbers."
Right, because the original. We can see
everything.
One, I think they tweeted it had the phone numbers on there, and then they realized they had to take it down because or else Twitter would have ganked that.
Rebel News posted it with everything originally,
and so they so they took it down and then redacted it and put it back up.
Yeah, I'm actually
okay with that. Like I know people, the whole issue with Elon and Twitter and censorship. I'm actually okay with I don't think we should be doxing people unless it's
I don't think we should be
directly committed a crime or something, and you want to identify who the person who committed the crime is. But if you're posting addresses and phone numbers, right, that's something that I don't think is above board.
No, I completely.
And I don't think they meant to. I'm not trying to say that they did. I think that they were just so excited that they got the scoop that they put.
Oh, trust me, in the group chat, people were all for posting with the names and everything attached. People had enough. And the point I'm getting to here is what I don't understand is how do we sit here? How do we sit here and talk to these individuals and hear them believe one side so wholeheartedly? I guess they could say they could say the same about us. But when you're really sitting there and you're just saying, this is people, single moms with $20 donation, they're losing their bank accounts forever, and they justify this. I know people who just sit there and say the people who are getting hurt, it's their own fault for being there.
Right. Well, I think there's a couple things, right? I do think that particularly with COVID-19 itself and the way that Western governments have responded to this thing, and I know Klaus Schwab has his whole Davos Great Reset agenda book that he has out and whatever. But when you really look at it, that was something where and in the UK, they've admitted this, where they actually were using what they call, behavioral science to infect their messaging and to inform their messaging on how they use essentially scare tactics from the government to go to people and try to terrify them into staying in their homes. Because I think the idea was early on, people weren't sure what the deal with COVID was, and everybody was erring on, on the highest possible side of caution that they could, right? And then, as things went on, people started to realize, all right, this seems to affect people differently. There seemed to be little certain, body types or characteristics that are affected more. Age obviously plays an issue, respiratory issues, precondition, et cetera, et cetera. We kind of started to get a sense of where we were, right? But the problem was because the fear tactics were cranked up so high that for other people, it never shut off. And I do think that the way that you consume your media was a big part of this, because I don't think that people are stupid. I think people are busy and people are distracted. And so it's a situation. No, that not being said, like, some people are definitely stupid.
I was gonna say
that, like, I mean, look at your prime minister, for example.
Oh, he's so bad. He's not my prime
Again,
minister.
look at our presidents. I mean,
he couldn't hang a flag today in Ukraine.
I saw that.
He fucked off to Kiev.
It was in Kiev, right?
He just fucked off to Kiev.
Right.
Just was like, I gotta go in the middle of Parliament. I don't want Parliament to stay open.
Right? He heard that U2 was going over. So
he heard we got to be friends. Tried to hang the flag. Flag won't go because the world says no. The world says no. That flag can't go. So no. And he can't do it. He can't even do a flag accurately.
No, he couldn't do it. And then was like, I think the foreign minister was with him or something. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was embarrassing regardless. And I will make fun of it.
I mean, it would be the same thing, by the way, if Joe Biden was trying to put one up. So I don't want to,
He was terrified by the Easter Bunny. That was good for me to watch.
Put up a flag. That's interesting.
No.
Probably not.
The answer is no.
Or it's either Trump wouldn't be able to do it, or he would do it like really, really well, and like really.
It would be one or the other. It would be a drastic.
One or the other. Exactly. Yes. And then if he didn't know how to do it, he wouldn't try either. He'd just be like, "Hey, put that flag up."
Pay a guy.
Yeah,
he's exactly. He's the definition of I've got to pay the guy.
Right, exactly.
I'm not going to try.
Who's an expert at this, and I'm going to get them to do it because I don't know how to do it. And
exactly,
he's not going to. He doesn't try to front. That's the other thing. He doesn't try to front. He's like, he knows if he doesn't know how to do something, he's like, hey, get the smart guy in here. Go do the thing. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, we were talking about the fear tactics. Yeah. So I think that the fear factor, another Joe Rogan reference, turned up so high though for so many people that it became one of those self-fulfilling prophecies of, the ends justify the means. That if we can save one life, it doesn't matter how many people, have to go hungry. It doesn't matter how many people have to get arrested, how many people it doesn't, because they were so scared. But what's sad about it was you really got the sense from a lot of these tactics that people would say, well, it's about saving others. But it really wasn't. It was about they themselves were so terrified of what could potentially go wrong. And that's not to knock it. Like I have a personal friend who went through throat cancer, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's like, I need to be triple vaxxed and I need to be double masked, because if I get like one particle of that thing, I'm done, right? He's out. Like he's not going to make it, right? He's there, do not pass go, do not collect $200, you're out, right? And
but so yet he'll shoot it into his body.
Right. Say again.
But then he'll shoot it into his body 3 times over.
He went and did it. I think he did it 3 times. I'm not sure, but I can understand from where he was coming from,
the fear perspective,
that for him it was an obvious threat. It's a risk benefit computation that we should all make, but for him, right, his risk is already almost at 100%, so he's got to be as careful as possible. But then when we turned around and we were doing that to healthy people and to healthy children and mandating these things, when we just got the masks off the airplanes like a week ago, this idea that we were forcing people for so long to do this, and to the point where, like, I live in the Washington D.C. area now. There are people now who still won't take the masks off.
You haven't seen Canada, have you?
Not in a while, no. I was going to come for the Freedom Convoy, but I'm not vaccinated, so
you're not welcome.
We've had COVID, and we just we didn't want to do it, and we would have come if we were able to, but obviously that's what the whole protest was about.
We're still most of, anytime I go to the grocery store, I would say there is at least a 60%, 70% still wearing masks.
Wow.
They're still have masks on. I'm in Vancouver. I don't live in the city, but I'm in British Columbia.
Sure.
Yeah. And so, no, I'm like this. There's teachers who still wear masks. They make the kids wear sanitizer. I'm not exaggerating. Anytime they leave the classroom, kids are still wearing masks or being forced to wear masks. They've allowed businesses to continue with the mask policy. And they've also made some businesses can still, if they choose, check vaccine documents. We still can't leave the country. We still can't get on buses or trains or anything if you're not vaccinated. You still can't leave the province on a plane. You still can't go to certain businesses. They're still laying off employees if they're not vaccinated. They are doxing. Like this
Because
shit's still happening.
it's in Europe. It's starting to come down. A
No,
lot of this stuff is coming
we're not
down
coming
in
down at
Europe
all. And they've
because
also stated,
you can get into Europe with a negative test now, and that's it.
yeah, in Europe. But so now the way that it's working to even get on but to get through an airport in Canada, you can't leave the country without documents. So it's fine that you're Europe, that's great, but you can't leave
On your end.
On our end, if I want to go to, like, you need to have papers to leave the province to get on a bus or anything.
That in the past, it was called the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it's super awesome.
It's called an exit visa. So that
yeah,
they would essentially create an exit visa. It's seen as one of the, craziest possible things that you could do.
We're the only country in the world that has this, but we have this. Canada has this.
I didn't realize that. I honestly, I have not heard of that for any other country, because we're talking to
there isn't.
Folks who are going over to Europe in a couple of weeks here, and so we've been going through country by country, and most countries in Europe, even even like UK, even Hungary, Poland, like it's just coming down. Negative test, and some countries aren't even asking for the negative test.
Well, the United States, though, here's the kicker. So this is where it's weird, right? You can't fly in from Canada if you're unvaccinated, but you guys don't allow us to come in unvaccinated, right? So the United States, as of last week,
was
re-upped it on land borders.
Okay,
we can't go.
The reason I'm hesitant is because I remember this thing kept changing, right?
No, it's still going. I know it for a fact.
Great, but it's still going. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And they re-upped it. They revamped it and said yes. And then, but the kicker is Canadian citizens within Canada cannot get on a plane, a train, or a bus out of the country. We are locked in. Canadians are locked in the country. Canada. And nobody knows about this because of Bill C-11, which is now in place, which means this won't go far unless you post about it. Even though we use VPNs because we are Canadians, we now have state-run media with CBC, where Facebook and Instagram have to pay CBC in order to run anything with their name on it. Bill C-11 blankets the country. And last night, overnight, the Liberals slipped in some new bills that will affect in the next 10 days, the handgun laws. So we are stuck.
So they're just trying to grab as much as they can.
Yeah. And the Liberals have now stated when in Ontario, if they get in the next bit, they will make it mandatory for every 5-year-old and above to be vaccinated,
so
to go to school.
Let's go back a little bit because you asked me why I got interested in China and then why I'm still interested in China. And so when I first got interested, it was because I thought China, and I still do to an extent, is the greatest threat to the West at the time. It just seems like an existential threat with the rise of this. I remember, saying, like I said before, I'm Polish, so it's like they're a massive communist country. Communists are bad, right? We're supposed to worry about those guys. So the Soviet Union went away. We won. Awesome, rah rah. Go team freedom. But what about these guys in Beijing? This seems to be an issue. And as I got more interested in it, so I was living over there and I was spending time working at the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, and then eventually was working for another consulting firm that does international business. And here's the way I tell a story now, right? So we were always told back in the late 90s, early 2000s that we need to open up to China because if we start having economic relations with China, you know what I'm going to say, that it will make them more open and they will have access to our capitalist system and it will make them support capitalism and it will turn China to be an open, democratic, and transparent system overnight.
Hearts and minds,
right? And it's going to happen, except it didn't. And so when I was over there, right, I would see American politicians and American business leaders, congressional delegations, codels, etc., coming over. And you know what they would say? They would say, wait, so how does your system work, right? They would say, well, and we were talking about those buildings that get knocked down earlier. So when you want to build like a high-speed rail or a magnetic levitation, maglev train, whatever you want, you say, well, yeah, it's going to be great, Shanghai Disney World, whatever. That we're going to put it here, and it's going to come from the airport, and you get all the way from the airport to the center of the city in 20 minutes, and it's going to be this much. And then they would say, well, what about all the people that that live in the area in between? And what about them?
What about them?
What about them?
Fuck them. That's what about them.
Move them. What about this? Is this like a historic district or something with that old thing?
Nah.
It's in the way. Get rid of it, right? And then you can see this on a larger scale with so because of China's rise, their economic expansion, they need more energy. So they are not an energy independent country by far. They do not have the resources they need. Almost all of their energy needs are imported. So for them, energy is key. Building those connections and building infrastructure with the Middle East, obviously overland is hugely important for them. So they want to go over, but of course they have this issue in the way. It's called the Himalaya Mountains, right, geographically. And so they're trying to build now infrastructure between China and the Middle East so they can get their energy across. The problem is the same way they used to do the Silk Road back in the day with like between China and Rome. The problem is there's this group of people in the way of the Chinese railroads and pipelines and road systems. They're called the Uyghurs, and they're in this area called Xinjiang. And so they said, well, the Uyghurs are in the way, and the Uyghurs don't want us doing this to their land. So what do? Put them in concentration camps. And so people, by the way, always talk about the Xinjiang, and I've been to Xinjiang, and I've been with the Uyghurs, right? But nobody explains why China is doing it, right? They say, well, China's just evil. I said, well, I mean, yes, I believe it is evil, but to them, they just say, well, that's our economic interest, and so we're just going to do it, and who cares?
For the good of the people.
That's the key to authoritarianism. And when we opened up with China, when we signed these agreements, when we started going over, it wasn't they who became more open. It was we and our leaders who became more authoritarian. And so you had the 1% of China, which is the CCP, and the 1%, if you actually do the numbers, it's actually a little less than 1%. And then you have the 1% in the West. And this is where I'm with you, that it's not left, right, it's up, down, right? Is the issue, because they want to institute that same type of China model here in the West. They want total control, total authoritarianism. You can call it the Great Reset, you can call it whatever you want to call
whatever
it. Whatever
conspiratorial word you want to use it.
Yeah, but you hear them saying, well, we can't let this is a time to reset our global markets and reset our global economy and reset our basic understanding of what our relationship with the government is. And they always paint it in these, super positive pictures. And then they go off and meet in at this snow-peaked summit in the Alps with their helicopters and because that's normal, right? Called Davos.
Super normal.
And as you do. And don't worry, we're doing this for you. And you realize, wait, you're not doing this for us, you're doing this for you. You want us locked up, and you want us to be atomized, and you want us to be consumers. And I actually had a whole thing. Funny enough, because I was coming at this issue from, and I try to come at issues from a kind of a sideways sort of strategy sometimes, because sometimes if you just launch right into it like a Sean Hannity or a Rush Limbaugh, and I have nothing against those guys, but sometimes it can turn people off. They don't want to hear it. So the other day
it really can.
And I was trending on Twitter all day on Sunday and Monday because I was talking about Pizza Hut. And people were like, why is Posobiec talking about Pizza Hut? And even the Twitter trend was like, they didn't know what to say. Political commentator Jack Posobiec discusses Pizza Hut in a series of tweets. I'm always discussing things in a series of tweets, right? But you guys don't always write about it. And they said, what's the deal? And my point was, I tried to take my kids this past weekend. We were coming back from a movie, and I saw that there was a Pizza Hut, I said, you know what? We haven't eaten yet. It's still kind of early. Let's stop. Let's pick up some food. Let's go eat. Because I had all these great memories of visiting Pizza Hut when I was a kid with my
I
parents,
remember that.
and they had Book It and these personal
Yeah.
pan pizzas, and you would
Yes.
go in if you read enough books, and you would have it, and you would sit down. You had those amazing red cups
Yeah.
that would keep your soda cold, but they wouldn't sweat. Pizza buffet, and the tablecloth was like red and white patterned, but nobody
Yeah.
really cared if you got it messy. It was sort of like you're allowed to be a kid, and video games, and it was just great. I said, yeah, let's go with the kids. Let's stay at the Pizza Hut. I go in, and this place was a wasteland. It was filthy. There were cardboard boxes everywhere. There were just a couple of the chairs on tables, and one booth was just full of delivery drivers, app drivers waiting for their DoorDash or whatever to be done. And I'm looking at this place, and I'm saying, like, I can't bring my kids here, right? This
Right.
is not a family place to bring my children. No way. And then you start thinking, and I said, it seems like we've lost a lot of those family places that we used to bring children, right? That used to just be a ubiquitous part of life, right? Where you would go and you'd be with my parents. And I started thinking about it. I said, well, yeah, we used to have that one, and that thing closed, and we used to have this thing, and then that thing closed. We used to have this shopping mall, but then that closed. And then, huh, it almost feels like they just want us in our homes consuming things that are brought to us from a little piece of glass, that you order your food or your romantic partner or your TV show or whatever it is off of the little piece of glass in your hand, but you're never actually having authentic human relationships or just interactions, not even full relationships, because those places where we used to experience the world and experience life are just slowly kind of being taken away in the name of consumerism.
Right. And that's why China's it's a
And of course,
terrifying
China is a
looming
huge part
threat.
of that. And so when I talk about, and so I think some people kind of got it, and other people are like, what are you talking about Pizza Hut for, man? Their pizza isn't even the best. I'm like, oh man, I'm not
No,
talking about
that's
it's, I'm using this as a cultural, I'm talking about culture. I'm talking about culture, and I'm talking about life. And this was a cultural touchstone for so many people in the 1980s, 1990s. There was this, and it was Pizza Hut, and it was shopping malls, and it was Blockbuster Video, and it was,
Blockbuster.
the rolling rink with your friend. These were social rituals that we held as a society. And yeah, maybe it was middle class, and maybe it was pedestrian, but you know what? It was fun, and it was wholesome, and it was good. And so, the idea, actually, I was talking about this with a buddy of mine, and he goes, he's from Central Ohio, and he said, there's nowhere where you can loiter anymore.
Right?
Yes. There's just this
Like,
idea of, yeah, we used to just kind of
hang out at the
out,
mall,
be
or
somewhere.
like the 7-Elevens with the Slurpees. And like when you just said Pizza Hut, as soon as you said Pizza Hut, I knew exactly what you're talking about. I can remember so clearly going, and when the promotion of reading books was like the thing that got you like moving. You're like, oh, I'm gonna read one more book.
When I
I'm gonna do
came
this.
in with that filled out book it with all the
How
stickers, and they
good.
treated you like a king when they saw it
Yes.
too. They treated you so well. They're like, well, what do we have here?
They're proud of you. It was a
youngster.
community
was
that was
awesome.
saying,
It
just
was
like,
awesome.
good job, kid. You did something good for your life. You did something, even though you're going to eat
Here's
shit.
what's
You know
interesting.
what?
And so
You're
somebody,
thriving.
another point, because I've been talking about this in a couple shows now, is that what made it make sense was that this wasn't an artificial culture or some sort of artificial corporate brand that was pushed in your face. They were tapping into something that already existed in the West, from the 1950s on, had already existed, and they just found a way to make a national or international brand, based around that same social fabric. It wasn't like they were reinventing the wheel, right? They said, we want buffets, we want Tiffany lamps, we want the cups, we want a greeter, someone happy to see you, someone who's just not, you go to a restaurant now and you walk in and they just throw that, that buzzer at you, and then they don't even talk to you.
Yep. There's no interpersonal skills. I see that so often. Well, you were saying that your son is little, and my son is
So my
little.
son turns, my oldest son turns 4. We have two boys, and the oldest turns 4 on Saturday, and the other one just hit 17 months.
Okay, so
fortunately, the baby formula thing is not an issue for us right now.
Oh, good. Well, I'm very happy to hear that. It's never ideal.
But I have some friends for which it is an issue. So
I can give you a fun fix for that. That'll work.
What do you
for
got?
them.
What do you got?
Yeah, no, seriously. We had to learn the hard way with our guy. So I'm the proponent of like, boob if you can, but boob if you can't, you got to figure it out some other way. And so the best next thing that a tiny little human.
My wife is from Eastern Europe. So she's like, very, I want natural stuff. I want to do stuff organic. Most of the formula that we would get, we would have her family send us from Europe to begin with. So
different standards,
but right there with you. Oh yeah.
So if you can't get access to formula, go to goat milk. Goat milk is the next closest milk and has the similar digestive enzymes as breast milk does.
So I've heard this. Yeah.
So we did that with Jack. When I didn't have enough, we supplemented with goat milk, and then we never had to use formula. So go use goat milk if you can't get formula right now. I know it's hard. It's not as hard as people think. Mm-hmm. Goat milk is literally everywhere. They just don't think to give it to their kids. It doesn't have the same antibiotics. It doesn't have the same anything that normal dairy does. And it has the same biomarkers and things. So that's why you see in India a lot, they will literally take the kid and just put it on the goat if they have to.
No way.
Because have you never seen that?
Wow. No, I haven't.
Oh my God, yes. Goat milk is the next best thing before formula. If you can go.
Well, no, I've seen kids having goat
formula.
milk, but I've never seen them,
you've never seen that? I'm gonna send you some videos, my dude, because I'm also super woo-woo and hippie-like in that sense. And it's like, if I'm gonna find the next best thing for him, and we went to goat milk. So yeah, if you can't get formula, go get goat milk, because there isn't a shortage on that right now that I know of.
Okay. So yeah, we're good. The other thing that we do is that there is a, believe it or not, about an hour drive from us, and I totally do it on weekends when it makes sense. We drive an hour out of the way. I bring the kids, I throw them in the car. We go to a drive-in movie theater.
Oh my God, yes.
And it's been open since 1956.
Woo.
And it's one of these places where the snack bar, it's exactly the same, except for the prices, obviously, as when it originally came out. The artwork is all 1950s. They sell what do they sell? Frozen pickle juice is like the thing that they sell, and just all sorts of random stuff.
So American.
And they play old old commercials like "Let's all go to the lobby," and before the movies start, they actually ask everyone to step out of their cars and to stand up, and they play the national anthem.
Damn America.
And it's like, this is so worth driving an hour out of my way, because that's a memory that my kids will have for the rest of their lives, right? Going to the drive-in movie with dad and standing up and putting your hand over your heart, and for a minute and a half, right? It's not that long, but it's the fact that everybody does it. And again, it's that community ritual. And we've been going for a couple of years now, so we start to recognize some of the regulars, and kind of work in a little bit. And he recognizes some of the kids, and there's like a little playground on the side where they can go during the movie. And it's just fun, wholesome. Sometimes we'll even go if there's like a bad movie, but we just want to go. And I want to spend money in things like that. I want to support things like that, because if you don't, they go away. And then, that's how you fight the global homogenization. That's how you fight the global homogenization.
How do you do it when you're state-run media? Because in America, there's a lot. Like, think about this. In America, you guys have two different perspectives.
I'm just talking about lifestyle in general.
But I'm asking you.
Freedom of speech issue is another one.
Well, no, I'm genuinely asking you, because there's a lot of people here, at least in Canada, like the majority of my listeners are American. So when I talk about Canadian things, it's literally because they don't have a clue what's going on up here, because no one does. And it's because
I do work with I don't know if you saw, but Human Events recently just did a merger with the post-millennial.
No, I
And
didn't.
yeah, so they're part
Okay.
of sort of the greater Human Events media group, I guess is what we're calling it. And so we've got the Canadian team, and they asked us about this. So do we want to, do you want to bring everyone to the US? Do you want to dive? I said, no, I want to keep, Post Millennial was originally Canadian, and it
Mhm.
should always have at least 1 foot north of the border and covering Canada stuff. And even if it's, even if it, some of the internecine politics, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't want to leave any of those followers or any of that audience in the lurch, because I think that the way that Post Millennial had built itself up was through Canadian politics. And I said 100%, like, make sure they're always covering Canadian politics.
Because if somebody isn't, you're not going to hear about it anymore. The way that it
Exactly.
has all changed, you're not
No, we
going to
have
hear about
so
it.
we have a duty. It's a duty. It's a duty
Yes.
to make sure that this message gets out.
And
And
I'm
and
glad.
by the same, and I used to work for Rebel.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago. So I mean, same thing with Ezra and Rebel, and just nothing but love for those guys and everything that they've been able to do in the face of real, actual adversity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have some very I call them my California friends, who were
Mm.
I just try to be nice. I call them my California friends, and I have some individuals who are like, I'm pissed off about the truckers because they're messing up our trade. And I said, they're not messing up your trade. They're not affecting your trade at all. My parents are long haul truck drivers.
No,
They're getting through
yeah.
just fine. It has nothing to do with that. They're not messing up anything. I said they're a group of individuals standing up for a country within a country that no one hears anything about because our media is reluctant and unwilling to have that conversation because they're paid by the current administration. So, but at least in America, for as I don't want to say as much as we've spoken about America, has its issues with this and that, for at least for America, there's at least two perspectives. At least there are more than one type of people having that conversation. There's a different
Mm.
narrative on either side. In my country, there is one narrative. And when you have one narrative that you cannot push back on, that you cannot question, at no point can you say anything against, that by definition is communism in my eyes.
Well,
And
that's China.
so
Yeah, that's China.
that's why when I fly home to Canada or I do any travel, I very often say going back to China, because I make that joke and people
Oh
think I'm
wow.
being racist towards Vancouver. I'm not. I'm being legitimate. And when I say that we have lost the same rights, we have the same issues, we have the same problems as China. The only
See,
difference is
I've never visited Vancouver. I've actually always wanted to, because I've heard there's a pretty big mainland Chinese population that's in
heard
Vancouver. Right?
pretty big.
No, I know. I've never
You
been there.
mean
I've never been there.
owned every all?
So it's something where just always wanted to, whenever we go somewhere. So I speak Chinese and my wife speaks Chinese too, believe it or
Yep.
not, even though obviously neither of us are Chinese. We're both Eastern European by background. And so we always are looking for places to, like, be able to practice and,
Oh, you would die here. You
yeah.
wouldn't have to
So we
speak.
so we love it. Yeah.
You don't need to speak English in British Columbia at all.
Oh wow. Wow.
No, you go to Richmond, all the signs are in Mandarin and Cantonese.
No way.
No, Richmond is predominant in Asian culture, period,
Well, that's
across
where I
the
want to
board.
go. Yeah, that's where I
But
want to
yeah,
go.
you go to
Because I was the
Richmond, then
expat, like I was the expat who didn't want to be an expat when I was in Shanghai. Because there's
okay.
different, there's different areas where, you know, the expats would congregate. French concession is a big one of them, or different like enclaves where you could go around. And I would say, no, I don't want to be around any European anything, right? I want to
Right.
be in China. I want this experience. That's why I'm here, right?
Yep.
And so I would go for, other than work, I mean, I would go sometimes for days without speaking English.
Oh yeah, you can easily the South Asian population in British Columbia is so massive. The Asian population and immigration over here and buying up property is so massive. We instituted in British Columbia a separate tax of 15% on people who are purchasing homes from South Asia, because we literally have so many being bought up and then left empty to
Well,
put their
that's
money.
also an issue, but that gets into an issue because they're being used as investment vehicles, because people are trying
Yeah.
to hide. Particularly, you see this a lot with party members from the CCP,
Mm-hmm.
that they want to be able to try to protect their whatever money through whatever venture they're into. There's Banks are not considered very trustworthy in China. So you do actually, when you meet, someone who's middle class in China, I mean, it's not uncommon for them to literally keep money under the mattress, or
Oh yeah.
have money like in some, false closet kind of thing, or false back of a closet kind of
Right.
deal, or safe. But when it comes to the higher cadres, or that, like I was saying, the 1% of the CCP, they'll use properties abroad, particularly in Canada, but we see this in the US increasingly, and also with food producing land, agricultural land here in the US, that it's being purchased by rich CCP members, and they're not living in it, they're not using it, right? And this, of course, is driving costs up for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I mean, I don't see some of my neighbors. I see them 3 times a year,
Wow.
or their kids just live here and are just little shitheads with their Lamborghinis going 180 down the freeway. Like,
Yeah,
I'm like,
people don't realize, right? And that's, by the way, I always say this too, that when people talk about, oh, the success of the CCP, the CCP is so wonderful, they're not successful. That's us. We gave them our wealth, all that
mhm,
money, all of that, all those jobs, when they went from the middle of the US, those manufacturing jobs, when they went
mhm.
over to China, guess what? That's where your wealth went. When you look at the city of Chicago and you say, why is it like this? When you look at Detroit, you say, why is it like this? Why are the New York subways so poor? Why are the airports, falling apart? Why are bridges and buildings falling down? Miami, we had a building just collapse, right? Right. We're at that point of civilization, or a couple months ago.
What?
Oh yeah, huge issue in
What?
Miami. Right, whole apartment high rise collapsed, and everybody was killed. Everybody, and it was just because of shoddy workmanship.
I did not hear about this at
And so,
all.
oh yeah, no, it was big news.
Oh
Um,
no.
Absolutely horrific. But it was one of those things where it wasn't even some, intentional act. It was just we're in that much of a decline phase right now, that things like this are going. We can't even fit our own children, right? We can't start a baby formula facility that's just mass producing this stuff without having a bacteria outbreak, apparently. And then you turn around and you look at, so that when we were talking about Shanghai before, so there's east and west. Have you been to Shanghai?
I've been to Shanghai. I've been all to the surrounding, like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, all of those types of more manufacturing area
Yeah,
type
yeah,
deal,
yeah.
and then
Okay,
Thailand,
so
Taiwan.
in Shanghai, there's a river, and then there's East Shanghai and West Shanghai. So the east side, the west side is the older, that's the historic Shanghai. The east side has only existed for like 30 years.
Mm.
And so 30 years ago, that was all farmland. It was farms, and they were actually considered by people on the west side as kind of like bumpkins. Um,
Yes.
and that you were, you wouldn't let your daughter date somebody from that side, was something that people would tell me. Um, but then China came in, and the CCP came in and said, no, that's going to be our financial center. That's going to be our hub. And so they took out all the farmland, like you were just talking about, the farmers, bye-bye. They got all kicked out. And then they essentially built their own version of Wall Street and put it right there on the other side of the river. And so when you look at those pictures of like the quote unquote famous skyline of Shanghai, with like
Hmm.
the Pearl Tower, and then a couple of the other towers next to it, that's all brand new. That's literally just built in the last 30 years. That is where the money from the West went. That's why your cities are falling apart. That's why your infrastructure is falling apart, because all of that time, our foreign direct investment, our capital outflows, our wealth, right? This wealth creation was being sent over there. And so, along with the jobs, to build up the rest of China, while here in the West, all we got back were, hey, we got some TVs, I guess.
It's funny because when you talk about them in the way that they build, like they're
But it's not the
smart.
CCP that did that. It's really
No,
not. It's the West.
but that's the thing, is people can't think that if you say that to a regular Western person, and you say that, they're gonna go, that doesn't compute, that doesn't make sense. They did that. They're this and this. It's like, no, if it starts somewhere. And when you slowly start giving intellectual property and you start doing these
Right.
things, they're just going to take it, and they're going to run with it. That's why their manufacturing is so impressive, and they pump out the rate that they do. That's why they don't allow TikTok during the days. That's why they don't
Mhm.
allow certain things, because they want to promote health and change. Like, one of the best things, maybe this is probably happened to you. I know we got to jump soon, but one of the best things that I always get, and they're the most honest people. When I went over there, I was only about 9 months after having a baby.
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm not going to do the accent because I'll get canceled for it. But they said to me, they're like, Kelsey, you're so fat. Why are you so fat right now?
Oh yeah. They're very,
Right
yeah,
to my
that's,
face.
well, I mean, I'm not like, I've never heard anyone say that to me, but,
Oh, they've said it to
um,
my husband too. Like when he
they
stopped
are
racing.
very, yeah, they're very quick to talk about people's weight, in a
Yes.
way that is just not done in the West anywhere. Or they'll ask you what we would consider very personal, very taboo kind of questions.
Yes.
Another thing, they'll ask how much money you make. That's another
Oh,
one,
yes. Because
all the time.
they
It's
put you in the spot right off the bat.
right, put you in this, well, how much do you make there? Right. And then they also go by month, not by year.
Mm.
But it's something where it's just not one of those things that we would consider a personable thing to say.
Right.
And for them, it's just common conversation. But then what's
Right.
funny
Yeah.
for me is that what I usually like to do, or what I did, maybe they know at this point, but I would
Your
just
book.
go in and speaking, complete, really strong American English. How are you doing, guys? Welcome. Oh boy, very excited to be in China. This is like a new experience for me. Is there anywhere that I can use my credit card to purchase some souvenirs for the family?
Oh my
And
gosh.
and then they would start talking without realizing that here I am sitting in the room and I can understand every word they're saying.
Oh, that's the one thing I wish I could speak Mandarin when I go over there, because I know for a fact when they're
You
looking
could
at
learn.
me.
It's so like there's a learning curve for sure. But honestly,
Yeah.
Rosetta Stone is amazing. I think Duolingo is amazing. And then
Really?
if, like you said, if you live in areas where once you kind of start, once you kind of crash through the barrier, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a barrier, but once you crash through that, you just keep going. And then especially if you're living close to areas where you can immerse yourself, then that's just
Totally.
a total leg up, because then you're going around and you're hearing things and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I just heard that on Rosetta Stone. That means,
Right.
the boy is drinking, or the light is green, whatever it is, right? Basic everyday stuff. And then you get to the point where you're just constantly learning it.
Well, whenever we do have our communist dictator chill out and allow people to leave and come in and out of the country,
Yes.
come up and I want to walk
Well,
around
I
with
always
you and
say
I'd like
that,
to see this.
once the gulags do get instituted, that I know that what my job is going to be, I'm going to be running the Mandarin language lessons
Yeah.
for everybody else. So hold on, so that we'll be able to communicate with the guards.
Oh my God, Jack. That's brilliant. I don't know a better way to end that. I think that's fucking fantastic, my
I've said that one
friend.
before.
Oh, I know, but I haven't heard it and I love it. I can appreciate it. We didn't get to chat about nearly anything I wanted to talk with. Oh, and dude, you got the accent dialed too.
Well, it's like it's like I said, you immerse yourself, you live there for a while, you start getting into it, the rhythm of it. And it's I'm so bad. I'm so rusty from when I was actually living there. And then even when I was in the Navy, I was still using it on a regular basis, but right now I'm super, super rusty.
That's okay.
And then
We'll
we
get
tried
you
to go to
dialed
San
in.
Francisco. We even tried to go to San Francisco and then go in, but because all the crime there is crazy, I mean, the whole place closes at like 6 p.m.
I know I'm going down to Texas here in the next couple of weeks, and then I have to go up to LA for a day. I haven't been to LA since in 2 years, so I'm real curious
LA
to
is best
see.
avoided. I try to stay out of there as much as possible.
I know I have to do one day there, and then I'm
Yeah,
back in.
I did like one day there, and I was doing some filming for Prager, and then I was pretty much like I had like dinner with a friend, and then I left.
You're like, that's enough. It's enough. It's
Actually,
a
I'm going to
solid
San
amount.
Diego. I'm going to San Diego for a wedding in like a month.
San Diego's not so bad. It
No,
doesn't
San
seem
Diego's
so
great. San
bad.
Diego is God's country. I love San Diego.
Can't say it was God's country.
Oh,
I normally hear that about Texas, but I love hearing that when someone says about San Diego. That's fantastic.
It's no, some of the area, La Jolla, beautiful.
Oh
Absolutely
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, I've got some friends that live there and we visit, and it is definitely it's one of the calmer, relaxing places to go right now.
Well, I
That's
was
for
in
sure.
there's a huge Navy base there. And so when I
Hmm.
was as an officer, that was a spot where you're going for training, you're going to Coronado Island,
Yeah.
you go out there for some conference or whatever, and then you're on Coronado Island, right? So.
Yeah. Hey, I go there to visit friends for a reason. Hey, it's
Mhm.
like your face is nice, but this is nicer.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
it's okay. I'll say it to their face. It's fine. But it's been great having you on. And I'm gonna say it. You got to come back because I want to pick your brain about your time in Cuba. I do want to talk about
Yeah, we didn't even talk
Guantanamo.
about that, did we?
I know, dude, we could do this for hours, but I'm
Yeah,
grateful for your
that's
time.
in a nutshell, it's there's the Hollywood version of Gitmo, and then there's the real version, and they are really just not the same thing.
Well, that's okay. So when you come on again, we'll have you give me the real version. How's that?
Love it.
Okay, awesome. Well, can you give everyone your handles and everywhere they can find you and follow your your comical tweets?
Yeah, so it's at Jack Posobiec on Twitter, Getter, True Social, Instagram, whatever you do. The podcast is Human Events Daily. We are a podcast for people who don't like podcasts, so we do 25 minutes per day. That's it, in and out, the news you need, and then you're gone. And of course, I'm also the senior editor of humanevents.com, which recently purchased Post Millennial. So we're working with
Congratulations.
the great Libby Evans and Andy No and Ari Hoffman, and just so many incredible reporters, commentators, and journalists there. It's really, really cool to be on the same team.
Well, I'm really glad for the expansion. Thank you for bringing on some people within Canada, so it's not just me screaming at the top of my lungs like a crazy
we'll
person.
have to get you. We'll have to get you next. If you got, hey, I'm supposed to be the editor. If you got an op-ed,
I mean, I got some
are
stuff.
submissions.
I got some stuff, please.
Okay, we'll publish you.
All right, darling. Okay,
if you meet our standards.
I mean, please, I am the standard.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
Trust. We'll get there. Otherwise, you stick with me. Everyone else, that's been Jack. We'll see y'all next week.